At 11:42 a.m. on September 1st, 2025, Russian soldiers stepped into a decaying building on the outskirts of Kherson. From the exterior, it appeared to be a mere abandoned shell, with cracked plaster and sagging roof tiles. However, behind this facade lay a clandestine command post, a critical node within Russia's UAV network on the western bank of the Dnipro. From makeshift stations such as this, Russia could direct over 40 Shahed drones towards Kiev weekly, while simultaneously launching at least 30 Lancets against Ukrainian artillery positions in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. To the Russian officers, it was perfect, concealed within a residential block, rendering it almost impossible to suspect. What they were unaware of was that Ukrainian intelligence had already uncovered the site. For days, every emission and movement inside had been meticulously tracked by a Leleka 100 UAV, silently transmitting data back to Mykolaiv. The entire layout had been mapped in intricate detail. And today, as the Russian crew entered, the countdown to its destruction had already commenced. Within minutes, a Ukrainian MiG-29AS would release two GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, each weighing 250 pounds, precision-guided munitions aimed directly at the heart of that building even before a single order could be dispatched. The GBU-39 is a dangerous weapon, measuring 6 feet in length and 7.5 inches in diameter and weighing 250 pounds. Its folding wings permit it to glide more than 60 miles from its release point. However, success necessitated meticulous planning. The pilot would be required to execute a demanding low-level ingress. Every waypoint demanded precision down to the meter, navigating past Podlet K-1 radar and Panzer S-1 batteries encircling Kherson. A singular timing error or deviation could spell doom for the mission. The Ukrainian Air Force was ready. A single MiG-29 had been assigned without fighter escort. Its sole support comprised the Leleka 100 Scout and a pack of mini UAVs acting as decoys, all synchronized to the second. By 11:55 a.m., preparations were complete. 2 GBU-39s were locked under the wings, fuses set to instantaneous detonation, rendering deep penetration unnecessary against a 2-story house. For defense, the MiG-29AS carried an SPS-141 jamming pod beneath its fuselage. On its outer pylons hung 2 R-73 short-range air-to-air missiles, a safeguard against Russian fighters or helicopters. Under its inner wings, 2 370-gallon drop tanks extended its combat range and guaranteed sufficient fuel for a high-speed escape. Inside the cockpit, the GPS over INS navigation suite was preloaded with target coordinates, cross-checked against live video from the Leleka 100. The bombs would lock onto their aim point with a margin of error under 3 feet. 3 minutes later, both RD-33 engines roared, and the MiG-29AS blasted off from its forward strip near Mykolaiv. Once airborne, Captain Mikhailo pushed the stick forward, descending to just 165 feet, hugging the terrain in nap-of-the-earth flight. At this altitude, even powerful long-range radars were limited by Earth's curvature, leaving them blind beyond a few dozen miles. On the HUD, numbers flickered constantly. Speed, 480 knots. Altitude, steady at 165 feet. A countdown glowed indicating time to release at 12 minutes, 8 seconds, and 47 seconds. Meanwhile, from a base along the Dnipro, a swarm of Punisher UAVs lifted off. Above Kherson, the Leleka 100 continued to circle silently, its camera fixed on the target house. Each second, the feed streamed back to Mykolaiv, cross-verified with the bomb guidance system under the MiG-29's wings. 12:06 p.m., the strike package was in motion. On Ukraine's command screens, the display split into two panes. One showcased UAV video of the building, the other tracked the MiG-29 closing in. The Leleka 100's infrared camera zoomed in. The yard antenna trembled in the breeze. A window hung half open. Two Russian soldiers carried a crate of equipment inside. They had no inkling that every move was being broadcast live to Ukrainian commanders and that death was now merely tens of miles away. At 12:08 p.m., 45 seconds. With 37 miles remaining, the SPO-15 Berioza radar warning receiver illuminated. The needle swung northeast. A sharp alarm blared in the cockpit. Podlet K1 radar had painted the MiG-29. Mikhailo immediately rolled the fighter into a beam maneuver, flying perpendicular to the radar beam. This tactic rendered Doppler velocity harder to classify, gaining him precious seconds. Concurrently, the SPS-141 jamming pod beneath the fuselage commenced emitting broadband interference, distorting the radar return. From the southwest, the deception package activated. Punisher UAVs pulsed intermittent signals, their tiny radar cross-sections producing scattered false blips. Other drones climbed higher, leaving visible contrails, compelling Russian radar crews to divide their attention between multiple tracks. Inside the cockpit, the Berioza screamed relentlessly. Mikhailo yanked the stick, maintaining the beam. At this angle, Doppler shifts became difficult to interpret, delaying a firm lock. Meanwhile, the SPS-141 continued to flood the spectrum, degrading the MiG-29's trace into a blur, lost amidst background clutter. At 12:09 p.m. 5 seconds, the Berioza tone shifted into a continuous, higher-pitched scream, unmistakable. The MiG-29 had been locked by fire control radar. A Panzer S-1 near Kirsten was now engaged. A surface-to-air missile launched, ripping upward in a trail of white smoke. Mikhailo had mere seconds to react. He pulled the stick lightly, bleeding speed down to 450 knots, while simultaneously stabbing the flare button and deploying the ALE-50 tow decoy. The Panzer missile sought the MiG's engine heat, but upon encountering the flare's infrared bloom, its seeker was deceived. The missile veered off, detonating in the distance. A gray cloud lingered in the sky. In the cockpit, the Berioza reverted to a lower alert. Russia's initial intercept had failed. Mikhailo gripped the stick tighter. He knew the decisive moment was next, the pop-up maneuver to release the bombs. At 12:09 p.m. 40 seconds, with only 17 miles left, he hauled back hard. The MiG-29 pitched up at 35 to 40 degrees, climbing to 6,500 feet within seconds. This pop-up was essential. The higher and faster the release, the farther the GBU-39s would glide, the more stable their trajectory and the deadlier their precision. On the HUD, red letters flashed. Release point, in range. The mission computer locked the target coordinates, synchronizing GPS and INS. On the weapons panel, Mikhailo's hands moved swiftly. Mode, precise coordinate, fuse, instant impact, release, single. He glanced at the HUD. Target coordinates glowed clear. Estimated error, plus or minus 2 feet. Almost perfect. Mikhailo gripped the stick firmly, thumb resting on the release button. One deep inhale, then 3 seconds later, both GBU-39s dropped in sequence from their pylons. As they separated, diamond-shaped folding fins snapped open, transforming them into aerodynamic gliders. Their INS GPS guidance held them steady, with target data from the Leleka already on board, ensuring a circular error probable, CEP, of less than or equal to 3 feet. The MiG-29 pushed down, diving back to 165 feet, racing low to escape Russian radar and missile coverage. The jet's role was concluded. From here, everything depended on the bombs. The GBU-39s glided at nearly Mach 0.9, descending toward the outskirts of Kherson. Their target, the exact coordinates of a two-story house, Russia's improvised UAV command post. Unlike unguided gravity bombs, the GBU-39 possessed flight capability. Its INS maintained trajectory even under GPS jamming. The diamond wings constantly trimmed against gusts, adjusting by a few degrees. Every millisecond, its processor recalculated speed, angle, altitude, and pressure, maintaining deviation within 1 meter. At 12:10 p.m., 12 seconds, at less than 1 mile from the target, the Leleka 100 zoomed in. The bomb dove at a 40-degree angle, closing in at nearly Mach 0.9. The two-story house filled the frame. Inside, Russian operators hunched over laptops, preparing UAV launch orders. They had no idea death was less than 10 seconds away. 2 seconds later, the GBU-39 switched to terminal guidance mode. A blinding flash tore across the image. A thunderous explosion followed. One bomb punched through the wall, its instantaneous fuse detonating on impact. The building erupted. Fire and smoke shot skyward in a column hundreds of feet high. The shock wave rattled the Leleka's camera, violently shaking its feed. Seconds later, the structure was gone, flattened into rubble. The antenna lay twisted. Laptops and crates were hurled dozens of yards away. Around 20 Russian personnel, UAV controllers, technicians, and officers were wiped out instantly. None survived. At 12:12 p.m., the Leleka banked overhead, transmitting confirmation. Hit confirmed. Target destroyed. On the command map, a red X marked the coordinates. The consequences were immediate. At least 3 Russian UAV strikes were canceled on the spot. Artillery fire went blind without drones for spotting. One battery exposed itself and was subsequently destroyed by HIMARS. Russian special forces lost their eyes in the sky. Ambushes and raids were delayed or aborted. Logistics convoys halted. Without UAV cover, they were compelled to wait until nightfall, disrupting supply lines to the front. One single strike had triggered a chain reaction. Crippled firepower, disrupted logistics, paralyzed reconnaissance. For Ukraine, the effect was immediate. Supply convoys moved more safely. Ammunition depots near the front no longer faced the threat of suicide drones. Artillery could maneuver and fire without constant fear of detection. News of the raid spread rapidly. On Russian telegram channels, UAV footage of a MiG-29 dropping GBU-39s in broad daylight and hitting with pinpoint accuracy went viral. This was more than the destruction of a command post. It was the planting of fear within Russia's ranks. Russian soldiers now comprehended that any house they entered, regardless of camouflage or neighborhood, could already be pinpointed by a Ukrainian UAV. One signal, one GBU-39 dot enough to transform shelter into rubble. In response, Russian command in Kherson issued urgent directives. UAV control posts must not remain fixed for longer than 30 minutes. Antennas must be camouflaged with netting or placed underground. Control crews must split and move constantly, never clustering in one building. However, these measures carried their own price. Constant moves disrupted signals. Camouflaged antennas weakened transmissions. Splitting crews made coordination more challenging.